The mid-2000s, a time of questionable fashion, the birth of YouTube, and on Britain's railways, a freight scene dominated by two behemoths, EWS and Freightliner. But into the settled landscape, a new challenger appeared, backed by a name that would make any railway insider of the era either shudder or start checking their company's insurance policy, that name being Jarvis plc. This is the story of Fastline Freight, a company that burned brightly and briefly before flaming out in the fastest way possible, purely because of who owned it. To understand Fastline, you have to understand Jarvis. Originally a humble construction firm, it was transformed in the 1990s into a rail infrastructure juggernaut for a simple strategy: buying everything in sight with borrowed money. It acquired Fastline way back in 1997, which at the time was a track renewals business. Jarvis won maintenance contracts by submitting bids so low they left no room for error. It was a business model built on the financial equivalent of a tightrope, and it gave them control of over 60% of the nation's track maintenance. But then came the 2002 Potter's Bar derailment. Traced back to poorly maintained points under Jarvis's care, this is just one of the many PR disasters for the company. With no choice but to admit liability, Jarvis's reputation was shredded, and its already precarious finances, creaking under the weight of those low-margin contracts, began to crumble. Against this backdrop of corporate chaos, Fastline Freight was actually quite good. They didn't mess about with the niche markets. Instead, they went straight for the big prizes: intermodal containers and coal. Their flagship service was 4 Oscar 90, a container service running from Doncaster down to Thamesport on the Isle of Grain. This was the public face of the company, and for the job, they got 3 Class 56s. Not new ones, of course. These were refurbished engines, being 56301, 302, and 303, overhauled by Brush Traction for a cool £700,000 each. While powerful, loud and classic, they were also, to put it mildly, a bit temperamental. But soon came the real payday: coal. Fastline landed a massive £20 million contract with the energy giant E.ON, and for this, they didn't skimp. They bought 5 brand new factory-fresh EMD Class 66 locomotives, numbers 66301 through to 66305. These were the gold standard of modern freight traction at the time. Painted in a smart two-tone grey and silver livery, hauling ricks of fresh steel hoppers, they looked the part. This wasn't a shoestring operation. This was a serious player. They were running coal from collieries like Door Mill and ports like Immingham to power stations across the country. By all accounts, Fastline's business plan was solid. But while the freight arm was looking good, the parent company was falling apart. Jarvis's main customer, Network Rail, decided to cut its track renewal budget by 30%. For a company built on a mountain of debt and wafer-thin profit margins, this was a death blow. The end came with brutal speed. On the 25th of March 2010, Jarvis plc announced its lenders were pulling the plug, and the company was placed into administration. And Fastline Freight was dragged down with it. It didn't fail, it was simply switched off. One day it was growing, the next its locomotives were parked up, and 1,100 people across the Jarvis group were out of a job. The aftermath was a feeding frenzy. Fastline's modern assets were snapped up. All 5 of the nearly new Class 66s went to direct rail services, who could hardly believe their luck. The troublesome Class 56s had a more varied fate. 56302 went to Colas Rail, and 56303 to Bars. 56301, remarkably, was sold into preservation before being sold back into mainline services some years later. For a decade, you could still see their unpainted coal hoppers running around the network, a ghostly Fastline logo still visible on their flanks. So what is the legacy of Fastline Freight? It's a story of a good idea built on rotten foundations. They had the right strategy, the right locos, and the right contracts, but they were tied to a parent company whose high-risk past finally caught up with them. Fastline remains one of those great what-ifs of the modern railway, remembered for its mix of heritage plus modern traction and its sudden death. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to use the like button and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.